The bus rolled into Fort Denton just after sunrise. The air smelled like dust and diesel, the kind that clung to your clothes long after you left the field. Private Emily Ward stepped down with her duffel bag over her shoulder, her boots still too clean for a soldier's liking. She was 24, small-framed, brown-haired, and quiet, not the kind of person you'd expect to find among the rough-edged men gathered near the barracks. Someone whistled when she passed. "Careful, fellas," said Corporal Jensen, smirking. "The doc doll's here to save us all." The others laughed. Emily didn't look up. She'd already heard worse in training. She kept walking, pretending the jokes bounced off her, but inside her heart pounded. This was her first real assignment, combat medic for Bravo Company, and she knew how they saw her. Too green, too gentle, too scared. The company was stationed on the edge of the desert, where wind cut through the tents and sand got into everything. The men spent their mornings in drills, their afternoons cleaning weapons, and their nights complaining. Emily spent hers memorizing the supply lists, checking every bandage and tourniquet twice. On her second day, Sergeant Cole Ramirez called her over during a field exercise. "Ward," he barked, "if someone takes a hit, what's your first move?" She answered carefully. "Assess for bleeding, airway consciousness." Then, "Wrong," Ramirez snapped. "You hit the dirt first. You stay alive long enough to do any of that." The squad laughed again. Emily didn't, she simply nodded. "Yes, Sergeant, it wasn't disrespect. It was focus." But to them, it looked like fear. That night she sat alone in the mess hall, pushing her food around while the others played cards. Across the room she could hear them joking about her again, calling her rookie medic, Hospital Barbie, the scared one. She remembered her mother's voice from years ago, soft and strong. "You were born to heal, not to hurt." "That's still bravery." Emily whispered it to herself. Still bravery. 3 days later, a real test came. During a desert patrol, one of the soldiers tripped over a training mine, a controlled explosive meant for drills. It detonated wrong, throwing him into the air. Smoke shouting chaos. Emily ran forward instinctively, med pack slamming against her side. "Stay back," Ramirez shouted. "It's not safe." But she didn't stop. The soldier, Private Laird, was bleeding badly from his leg. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, her fingers steady now. She tore open her kit, pressed gauze hard on the wound, and started talking to him. Calm, low, reassuring. "You're fine, Laird. Stay with me. I've got you." The bleeding slowed. She reached for the tourniquet and froze. It wasn't there. Someone had removed it from her kit. Her stomach twisted. She'd checked that bag this morning. Twice. Ramirez arrived seconds later, cursing. He handed her his belt without a word. She tied it tight around Laird's thigh and looked up, meeting Ramirez's eyes for the first time. He didn't say anything, but he saw the fear and the fury behind hers. Later, when the dust settled, she went back to her tent and dumped her bag on the floor. Everything was in place except the tourniquet. Someone had clearly taken it. Outside, laughter echoed. Jensen's voice carried through the canvas walls. "Hey, Doc Doll, you still think you can play soldier?" Emily's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to fight, to quit, but she didn't. She packed her gear again, perfectly neat, every item in its place. Then she sat on her bunk, staring at her hands. The same hands that had saved a life hours ago, now shaking with silent anger. That evening, Captain Dana Moore, the company's medical officer, stopped by. She was one of the few women Emily had seen in command here. Her presence was quiet but commanding, the kind that didn't need to shout. "I heard about today," Moore said. "You kept your head. That's rare for day 3. Emily shrugged. "I lost a tourniquet." "Someone, I know." Moore's eyes softened. "You'll learn. Some of them test you to see if you'll break. Don't give them what they want." Emily nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Before leaving, Moore added, "You did good, Ward. Don't let their noise drown that out." Those words stayed with her all night. By the weekend, deployment rumors started spreading. The unit was being prepped for a rapid assignment overseas. Nobody said where, just that it was hot. Real combat, real danger. For most of the men, it was excitement. For Emily, it was a test she didn't ask for, but one she couldn't back away from. The morning of the announcement, the whole company lined up in front of the hangar. The air was tense. Ramirez read off the orders. Bravo Company, medical unit attached, deployment in 72 hours. A low murmur rolled through the ranks. Some cheered. Others cursed. Emily just stood still. Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. Then Jensen leaned toward her. "Better pack your teddy bear, rookie. It's going to be a rough bedtime out there." Emily didn't answer. She looked at him, steady and cold. It was the first time anyone had seen her look like that. Jensen flinched, just a flicker, and turned away. That night, a storm rolled through the desert. The wind slammed against the tents, rattling metal poles and snapping cables. Emily sat awake, packing her gear again, triple-checking every piece. Every bandage, every syringe, every tool. She taped the bag shut herself. Outside, she heard footsteps. 2 voices, Jensen and another soldier. "She won't last a day out there," one said. "Bet you 20 she cries before the first shot's fired." "Make it 40. Their laughter faded into the storm. Emily sat still, her face pale in the flashlight's glow. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply wrote a note in her small notebook, the one she always carried. Prove them wrong. No matter what it takes. When dawn came, she was already standing outside the barracks, watching the sun rise over the sand. Her bag was on her shoulder. Her uniform was spotless. Ramirez walked by, yawning, coffee in hand. "You trying to impress someone, Ward?" "No, Sergeant," she said softly. "Just getting ready." He raised an eyebrow, half amused. "For what?" She looked toward the horizon where the desert met the sky. Endless, bright, and dangerous. For whatever comes next. 3 days later, they boarded the transport plane. The engines roared, drowning every voice. Emily sat between 2 soldiers who refused to look at her. But she wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about Private Laird, alive because she didn't freeze. She was thinking about Captain Moore's words. Don't let their noise drown that out. And as the plane lifted into the clouds, she felt something she hadn't since she arrived at Fort Denton. Quiet certainty. They all saw a scared rookie. They had no idea who she really was. The heat hit them the moment the plane door opened. A wave of thick, dry air rolled in, heavy with dust and the faint smell of burned oil. Private Emily Ward stepped down with her pack, blinking into the blinding sun. They'd landed at a forward operating base somewhere outside Kandahar. The place looked like a half-built ghost town. Concrete walls, razor wire, sandbags stacked higher than a man's head. "Welcome to paradise," Corporal Jensen muttered as he passed her. Emily said nothing. She'd stopped responding to his jabs. Every insult now went into a quiet fire she was building inside, one that would only burn hotter with time. Their first week was uneventful. Patrols, routine aid shifts, dusty days that all looked the same. The local kids waved when convoys rolled by. At night, the wind carried the sound of dogs barking far off in the dark, but tension ran under everything. The kind of silence that feels like waiting for something to break. Sergeant Ramirez kept the squad sharp, barking orders, drilling every movement. He watched Emily from a distance, not mocking like the others, but skeptical, like a man waiting for a reason to send her home. Then one morning, that reason almost came. The patrol route was simple, a 2-mile sweep around a nearby village. Emily rode in the second Humvee, medical kit strapped beside her. She could feel her heart pounding with every bump of the dirt road. "Relax, Doc," Jensen called from the gun turret. "We're just sightseeing," she tried to smile. "You said that yesterday." "Yeah, and look, still breathing." Minutes later, they entered a narrow pass between 2 mud brick walls. Chickens scattered. A few men stood near the corner, too still, too quiet. Emily felt something shift inside her, a wrong kind of quiet. Then everything exploded. The blast ripped through the first Humvee, a thunderclap of fire and dirt. The vehicle lifted off the ground, landed sideways. "Shouts, gunfire, smoke, ambush!" Ramirez screamed. Emily's ears rang. She ducked low, instinct kicking in. Her first thought wasn't herself. It was the wounded. The radio crackled. "We've got 2 down. I repeat, 2 down in the lead vehicle." "Ward, stay here," Ramirez shouted. "Do not move until I call it." But Emily could already see the flames rising. Through the haze, a hand was reaching from the wreckage. She didn't think. She grabbed her medkit, swung open the door, and ran straight into open fire. Bullets snapped past her, kicking up dust at her boots. She could hear Ramirez yelling behind her, the others shouting, "Get her back!" But her mind had gone still, focused, calm in the middle of chaos. She reached the burning Humvee, pulled the door open with both hands. The heat scorched her palms through the gloves. Inside, Private Laird, the same soldier she'd saved weeks ago, was pinned under twisted metal, screaming in pain. Hey, it's me, she said, breathless but steady. Emily, you're okay. Look at me. She crawled halfway inside, tugging at the harness straps. Metal tore, flames crackled. Her sleeve caught a spark. She slapped it out and kept going. Another explosion rattled the ground nearby. Someone shouted her name. She ignored it. Come on, Laird, stay with me. She hooked her arm under his shoulder and pulled with everything she had. The metal finally gave. They fell backward into the dirt together, just as another burst of gunfire shredded the wreck. She dragged him behind a wall, hands slick with blood. Her vision blurred from smoke, but she worked by touch. Pressure, seal, bandage, breath. Then something stung her shoulder. Sharp, searing pain. She looked down and saw the graze. A bullet had nicked her arm. She clenched her teeth and kept working. Within minutes, Laird was stable enough to move. She waved frantically toward the others. Medic down here. I need help now. Ramirez appeared, sliding beside her, face streaked with dust. You're hit. I'm fine, she said, voice hard. He's not. They lifted Laird onto a stretcher and carried him to cover. Emily's knees buckled halfway, but she didn't stop. Only when he was safe behind the Humvee did she finally sink down, shaking. The firefight ended 10 minutes later. The ambushers vanished into the hills, leaving behind silence and smoke. When they returned to base that night, the mood was strange. Nobody cheered, nobody joked. They all knew what she'd done. Jensen avoided her eyes. Ramirez didn't speak at all. He just handed her a bottle of water and walked off. Emily sat alone on an ammo crate, staring at the dirt between her boots. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only exhaustion. Captain Dana Moore found her later, wrapping her wounded arm. You disobeyed a direct order, Moore said quietly. I know, ma'am. You also saved a man's life under direct fire, twice. Emily didn't answer. She just looked at the captain, eyes red but steady. Moore's tone softened. Warden, not many people run toward fire. You did. Emily exhaled a shaky half-laugh. I didn't think. I just moved. That's what real medics do, Moore said. They move when no one else will. The next morning, the story spread across the base like wildfire. The rookie who ran unarmed into enemy fire. Some called it stupid. Others called it brave. When Ramirez passed her at breakfast, he stopped for a moment. You got lucky out there. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I was doing my job. He didn't reply. But later that day, she found her medkit by her bunk. Cleaned, reorganized, perfectly restocked. At the bottom, taped to the inside flap, was a fresh tourniquet. No note. Weeks passed. Missions blurred together. Emily grew quieter, sharper. She learned to read the ground, sense danger before it came. The others started listening when she spoke, though they wouldn't admit it out loud. Still, there were whispers. Some soldiers said she'd gotten reckless, that her luck would run out. Others said she was trying to prove something. Maybe both were true, but one night, when she looked around the dim tent and saw Laird laughing again with the others, she decided it didn't matter. Then came the mission that changed everything. A convoy of supply trucks had gone missing near a civilian village. Orders came down fast. Bravo Company would sweep the area and recover what they could. Simple, routine, or so they were told. As they geared up, Ramirez looked over at Emily. You ready for round 2, Doc? She nodded, checking her pack. Always. He studied her for a second, then muttered, You scare me more than the enemy, you know that? She almost smiled. Good. The convoy rolled out before dawn. The horizon was a dull red line against gray hills. Emily sat in the back, hands on her med bag, eyes scanning the road. Something in her gut felt wrong. Too quiet. Too easy. When they reached the village outskirts, Ramirez ordered a halt. Something's off. Stay sharp. And just like that, the world exploded again. Gunfire rained down from the rooftops. Trucks spun sideways, men dove for cover. Emily's heart leapt into her throat, but this time she didn't freeze. She grabbed her kit and ran, unarmed. Again. And this time it wouldn't just be soldiers' lives she was running to save. The ambush hit them harder than any before. Bullets cracked through walls, ricocheting off metal. Dust and shrapnel filled the air. Voices shouted over the chaos. Orders, screams, static. Private Emily Ward dove behind a half-collapsed wall, clutching her med bag to her chest. Her ears rang from the blast that flipped their lead truck. The village around them had turned into a war zone. "Ramirez," she shouted into the comms. "We've got wounded everywhere, 2, maybe 3 down." Static, then his voice cut through, hoarse and panicked. "Hold position. Do not move until I give the go." Emily looked around. The world was burning. Houses smoldered. A child's cry echoed from somewhere down the alley. The sound cut through her like a blade. She saw Jensen crawling toward her, his leg bleeding heavily. "Doc, I'm hit!" She was already moving. "Stay down, Jensen. Don't move." Her hands were steady as she wrapped his thigh. "It's deep," she muttered, tying off the bandage. "You'll walk again, but not today." "Where's Ramirez?" Jensen gasped, trying to get radio contact, but she already knew the radio operator was gone. Their comms were half dead, and that meant they were alone. Minutes crawled like hours. The gunfire slowed, replaced by the crackle of distant flames. Emily peeked around the wall. The attackers were pulling back. For now, she saw movement ahead, small figures darting between buildings, civilians, a family, 2 kids, a woman waving desperately from a doorway. She froze. They're trapped in the crossfire. The protocol was clear. Medics stayed with the unit. They didn't leave cover, not without orders. But orders were gone, and those screams weren't fading. Emily looked back at Jensen. "You'll live," he blinked. "Doc, don't you dare—" But she was already gone. She sprinted across the open street, bullets cracking behind her. The air smelled like gunpowder and blood. She dove into a broken doorway, coughing from the smoke. Inside, a young mother clutched her son, maybe 5 years old, blood running down his arm. "It's okay," Emily said softly, lowering her weaponless hands. "I'm a medic. I'm here to help." The woman didn't understand the words, but she saw the eyes, calm, focused, human. Emily knelt, checking the boy's wound. Shrapnel, shallow. She tore a strip from her sleeve, bandaged it quick and tight. "You're brave, buddy. Hang in there." Then the ground shook. Another explosion, closer this time. The roof groaned. "Move," Emily shouted, waving them toward the back. "Go, go!" She guided them through the smoke to a rear alley. Outside, gunfire started again. She saw 2 enemy fighters rounding the corner, rifles raised. She froze. No weapon, no cover, just her body between them and the civilians. They shouted, and suddenly gunfire erupted from behind her. The 2 attackers fell. Ramirez and 2 soldiers appeared, faces black with soot. "What the hell are you doing, Ward?" he roared. "You disobeyed a direct—" "Civilians," she snapped. They were trapped. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes flicking to the mother and her kids huddled behind her. For a moment, even Ramirez didn't have words. Then he looked around. "All right. Everyone move. Back to the convoy." They fought their way out, slow and brutal. By sunset, the unit was down 4 men with 5 wounded, but every civilian survived. When they finally reached the forward base, exhaustion hit like a wave. The med tent filled with groans and antiseptic and silence. Emily worked for hours, stitching, cleaning, stabilizing. Her shoulder throbbed, her hands raw. When it was over, she sank onto a cot, head bowed. Across the tent, Ramirez stood in the doorway, watching her. He walked over slowly. "You broke every protocol in the book today." "I know. You could have gotten yourself and others and killed." "I know that too." He stared at her, waiting for an apology that didn't come. Finally, he said quietly, "You saved 12 people who weren't even part of our mission." Emily lifted her eyes. "Does that count for something?" He didn't answer. He just nodded once and walked out. Later that night, Captain Dana Moore entered the tent with a clipboard. Her tone was calm, but her expression wasn't. "Private Ward," she began. "I've been ordered to file a report. Command wants a full account of your actions today." Emily looked up, eyes heavy. "Am I being charged?" Moore hesitated. "Possibly. You left your assigned position. You exposed others to risk. It's considered insubordination." Emily didn't react. "I'd do it again." Moore sighed, closing the folder. "I know you would." She sat beside her. "Listen, sometimes the right thing doesn't look right on paper. You saved lives today, more than anyone will admit. But the Army doesn't always reward that kind of courage." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Then I'll live with it." Over the next few days, the story spread again. This time the tone was different. Soldiers from other units whispered about the medic who ran unarmed, Twice. Some said she was crazy. Others said she had more guts than the rest of them combined. But inside her own unit, the silence was heavy. Ramirez barely spoke. Jensen avoided her. The men didn't know whether to respect her or resent her. Then one afternoon, as she crossed the yard, she heard a familiar voice call out, "Hey, Doc." It was Laird, walking on crutches but smiling wide. "Heard you played hero again. Guess I owe you 2 lives now." Emily smiled faintly. "Let's not make it 3. Behind him, Jensen approached slowly, face serious. He stopped a few feet away. "Doc, about before. The jokes. The kid thing. I was stupid," she finished for him. He nodded. Yeah, that, she didn't forgive him out loud. She just gave a small nod, and that was enough. That night, she stood alone outside the barracks, staring at the horizon. The sun was sinking, a dull orange fading into deep blue. She thought about all she'd seen. The fire, the screams, the weight of someone else's blood on her hands. And yet, beneath it all, she felt something solid. Peace, because for once, she didn't doubt herself. Not one bit. Behind her, Ramirez's voice broke the silence. "You know, Ward, Command's not happy. But the men, they're starting to listen when you talk." She turned, surprised. "Why?" He smirked faintly. "Because you walk through hell with no gun and somehow come back with everyone alive. Hard to argue with that." Emily looked down at the patch on her uniform. The medic cross faded from sand and sun. She smiled. "I didn't come here to argue, Sergeant." Ramirez nodded once. "Good, because tomorrow you're leading the patrol." She blinked. "Me?" "You earned it." She didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, from purpose. Tomorrow wasn't just another mission. It was proof. Proof that courage didn't always come with rank or muscle or noise. Sometimes it came from the quietest person in the room. The one everyone doubted until the moment the bullets started flying. And deep down, she knew this next mission would be the one that decided everything. Her fate, her future, maybe even her name. But no matter what happened next, she'd already crossed the line that mattered most. She was no longer the scared rookie. She was the one they followed when everything went dark. The next morning, the air over the outpost was still. Too still. Even the desert wind seemed to be holding its breath. Private Emily Ward stood by the convoy, adjusting the straps on her medic pack. Her name had finally been added to the mission roster. Not as an assistant, not as a tag-along, but as the lead medic. And though no one said it out loud, everyone knew this patrol would be dangerous. Sergeant Ramirez approached, his expression unreadable. "You've got point on medical coordination," he said. "No backup unit this time. We'll be light and fast," Emily nodded. "Understood." He studied her for a second. "You good?" "I will be," he smirked faintly. "That's what scares me." They rolled out before dawn, the world painted in shades of red and gray. The road wound through open desert, dotted with abandoned farmhouses. It was quiet, too quiet again. Inside the lead Humvee, Emily sat beside Ramirez, watching the horizon. Jensen was in the gun turret this time, scanning for movement. "Feels wrong," he muttered. Emily's gaze stayed forward. "Trust that feeling." An hour in, the first sign of trouble appeared. A plume of smoke rising ahead. "Possible IED," Ramirez said. Eyes open. As they neared the smoke, the radio crackled. Faint voices panicked. A local convoy had been hit ahead. "Civilians again," Ramirez cursed under his breath. "Command says to avoid engagement, stay en route." Emily's head snapped toward him. "There could be survivors." "That's not our mission." She stared at the distant smoke, jaw tight. "It's someone's life." Ramirez hesitated. Then, "You so much as step out of this vehicle without an order, I'll—" But she was already reaching for her med bag. "Ward!" He shouted too late. She'd thrown the door open and jumped down, boots hitting the dirt. The air was thick with dust and fire. Vehicles burned along the roadside. Bodies, too many, lay scattered in the wreckage. The sound of crying came from somewhere deep inside the smoke. "Hello?" she called. "If you can hear me, yell!" A faint voice answered. A child's. Emily ran toward it. Her boots crunched on glass and debris. She found them near a broken truck. A boy and his father, both burned and bleeding. She knelt beside them, choking back tears. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." She pulled open her kit, hands working fast, automatic. She didn't even notice the faint whine in the distance. Then came the click. Her blood went cold. She froze. Her knee was pressing against a half-buried mine trigger. One move, one breath wrong, and everything around her would go up in fire. Ramirez's voice roared through the smoke. "Ward, stay still." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The father reached for her, panicked. She shook her head. "Don't move, please," her mind raced. If she shifted weight slowly, maybe. But there were 2 lives beside her. She couldn't risk them. "Ramirez," she shouted. "Get the EOD here now." "Negative," came the radio reply. "Team's 30 minutes out." 30 minutes. She didn't have one. She looked at the boy, bleeding and terrified. Then she looked at the father. His lips moved in silent prayer. And she made a choice. "Ramirez," she said quietly into her radio. "Tell command to stand by." "What are you doing?" "Saving them." "Ward, don't." She set down her kit, locked eyes with the boy, and said softly, "Close your eyes." Then she reached down, slow, steady, and shifted her knee off the trigger. The explosion ripped through the air, a shockwave of dirt and sound. The radio went dead. When the dust cleared, silence fell. Ramirez was the first to move. He sprinted through the smoke, coughing, eyes scanning frantically. Then he saw it, the crater, and beside it, somehow still breathing, was Emily Ward. Her body was torn, uniform shredded. But the boy and his father, both alive, were crouched beside her, crying. She was covered in blood, but smiling weakly. "Told you. I'd keep them safe." Ramirez dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his hands to her wounds. "Stay with me, Ward. Don't you dare quit on me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't call me rookie." He almost laughed, but his throat caught. "You're not. You're not, Ward. You're the bravest damn soldier I've ever seen." They airlifted her to the base hospital. For days she drifted between life and death. News spread fast, faster than command could contain it. Soldiers whispered the story across outposts and mess halls. The medic who stepped on a mine to save civilians. Command tried to frame it quietly. Unauthorized engagement, accidental detonation. But witnesses spoke out. Even Ramirez broke silence, writing an official statement. She disobeyed orders because she valued lives over regulations. That's not weakness. That's courage. The report reached Captain Dana Moore, who carried it to command herself. 2 weeks later, Emily woke up to find her arm bandaged, ribs taped, and Captain Moore standing at her bedside. "You made it," Moore said softly. Emily blinked, voice hoarse. "The boy?" "Alive, his father too. They're safe." Emily let out a shaky breath. "Good." Moore smiled faintly. "There's something you should know." She stepped aside. Behind her stood Ramirez, uniform pressed, face unreadable. He raised his hand and saluted. Emily frowned weakly. "What are you doing?" "Showing respect," he said. His voice cracked. "To the soldier who reminded all of us what duty really means." Days later, the entire base lined up outside the infirmary. No cameras, no press, and just soldiers. When Emily stepped out, leaning on a crutch, the air went quiet. One by one, they saluted her. Eva Jensen. Even the men who once mocked her. Ramirez stepped forward. "You taught us something, Doc. You showed us that fear doesn't mean weakness. It means you care enough to act anyway." She looked around, at faces that once laughed, now solemn and changed. Her voice trembled but stayed strong. "I didn't do it to prove anything. I just couldn't watch people die when I could do something about it." Ramirez nodded. "That's exactly why we follow you." A month later, Emily's transfer papers arrived. Reassignment to a stateside training hospital. She was healing, but her combat days were over. Before she left, she walked to the memorial wall, names carved into stone, sunlight glinting across them. She placed a hand against it, whispering, "For all of you who didn't come back, thank you for letting me try." Behind her, a voice spoke. "They'll tell your story, you know." It was Captain Moore. Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe. But I'd rather they remember the lives we saved, not the mine I stepped on." Moore tilted her head. "They'll remember both, because sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is walk into fire with nothing but her hands." Months later, halfway across the world, recruits at Fort Denton's medical course would watch a short training video. It showed a quiet medic kneeling in the dust, tending to the wounded under fire, where no narration, no music, just her calm voice saying, "You're okay. Stay with me." At the end, the screen displayed a single line, "In honor of Private Emily Ward, for proving that courage has many faces," and somewhere far away, sitting by a hospital window with sunlight pouring in, Emily would smile, a small, quiet smile that said everything, because once they'd all seen a scared rookie and she had walked, unarmed, straight into enemy fire, and never looked back.